The oil kingdom's climate summit. What could possibly go wrong? Well, early signs are it might just go right. Hello and welcome to Dubai and the United Nations Climate Conference COP28. It started in controversy as the summit's president is also boss of the national oil company. But there are whiffs of hope in the air and also early breakthroughs. We will take you through what's at stake and what success could look like. We'll also take you outside the summit and highlight some innovative solutions here in the United Arab Emirates, from smart farms in the desert to huge rooftop solar arrays. Oh, look at that. That's great. And with this being the biggest COP ever, I'll take you on a tour of what's on offer. But first, I'm joined by Sky News' top team here, climate reporter Victoria Seabrook and science editor Tom Clark. Always get a bit of a buzz at the start of these things, and there has already been somewhat of a result, Victoria.
Yeah, it got off to a great start. They've announced that finally up and running is this long-awaited fund for vulnerable nations who are hit by climate disasters. So last year, big landmark agreement, they committed to creating one of these funds. A year later, actually that's not very long in clunky kind of UN terms, it is now up and running. And the reason that's important is there's a lot of scepticism around the COP process. It's very big. Who does it serve? This is one example, developing nations say, of why we really need it.
And this is the idea that those countries like the UK that have been polluting for ages need to pay for some of the climate damage in these other countries. There's sensitivity over whether it's compensation, I gather, though, briefly.
Yeah, very, very wary of any language like that, and it's all quite vague about who's going to pay in, who is on the receiving end. The language leaves some suitable wiggle room on that.
But there was some money on the table, and that looks good. Now, one of the things they're also pushing for, Tom, looking forward, is some big thoughts on renewable energy and also energy efficiency.
That's right. Energy efficiency is one of those easy wins, or so the thinking goes. Try and save, try and use the energy you've got as wisely as possible. But quite hard to impose international standards for, so not so much buying, but it's going to be a hard road, that one. But what's much easier to push, of course, is renewable energy. The prices are falling fast. It's something people can find they can roll out. While I've been here in the UAE this week, we went to visit what is currently, probably won't be for long, the largest single-site solar farm in the world. It is 7 kilometres long, 4 million solar panels bolted together, 2 gigawatts of electricity. That's quite a lot. Built in just 10 months.
What impact is that going to have on the big question, do you think? The big thing here, we're in a petro state, fossil fuels are the big enemy. How are we going to square it?
Yeah, there's a big row over what to do with fossil fuels, which is perhaps surprising given that this is a climate conference and fossil fuels are the #1 cause of climate change. There's a dispute about whether we commit to phase out, phase down, or whether the language even makes it into the text. I mean, 2 years ago that would have been unthinkable, so there's a big row brewing about that. But also alongside that, it's whether we are targeting fossil fuels altogether or just the emissions that come from fossil fuels.
And some tricky language on this, not least what might appear in the final text.
That's right. So some people are pushing for, we just phase out fossil fuels or phase down fossil fuels. But there's kind of middle ground there. How about we phase out unabated fossil fuels? And that's a very important weasel word, because what unabated means is, we could get rid of the emissions. How do you do that? Well, one way, and oil-rich countries like the UAE, which have got the cash to splash on this, are pitching, why don't you store those emissions, the CO2 from oil and gas, under the ground, carbon capture and storage, it's called. We went into the mountains of the UAE to visit one of these projects funded by the state oil company ADNOC. They say it's a solution to their emissions problem, but I challenged one of their key directors to ask him, is it not just an excuse to allow you to continue to pollute?
The reality is the world needs energy. The climate targets by 2050 or early, I think these are challenging targets. Let's acknowledge that.
Do you think they can be met?
I strongly believe that they can be met. Let's not underestimate when we come together, we act. Let's not underestimate when there is a clear and present danger, we respond.
A little bit optimistic here. Mood music so good so far, Victoria?
Very hard to say until the final minute.
I didn't think I'd be able to capture you.
I'd say the same. Too early to be optimistic, but I'm not pessimistic yet.
Well, thanks very much. I didn't think I'd be able to pin you down, but I tried. Now then, there are climate solutions out there, even in a petro state like this. Some green ideas, some smart people. I've been out to meet them. Dubai, a city built on oil, known for flashy displays of wealth, consumerism and excess. It's not somewhere you might expect to find innovative climate solutions. But look a little deeper, or higher. Oh, look at that. This is amazing.
It is, huh?
Laurent Longuet used to work for the oil company Total before founding Siraj Power, the Gulf's leading supplier of solar on rooftops.
There are a lot of friends working in the nuclear or etc. They were making fun about solar, you know. It's,
Oh, really?
but after 10 years, a lot of them, they now work in solar or wind or etc.
Now you're laughing. Beneath these panels is King's School Al Barsha, home to thousands of students aged 3 to 18 from all over the world. It's also now a 2-megawatt power station.
Over a full year, it's more than half of the energy of the school which is coming from the roof, but on a certain day we produce more than what they need, so we are even in a position where we export some electricity back to the networks.
Buildings in the UAE use masses of energy for air conditioning, taking nearly 3/4 of all the electricity. It's a perfect match for solar, giving power in the daytime when it's needed most.
It's by far the cheapest way to produce electricity. So there is a,
Even here it's cheaper than oil and gas?
Yeah, it's much cheaper to produce
Really?
Electricity from solar than to produce it from coal, from gas, from whatever. Much cheaper. I'm not saying 10 or 20%, it's 50% less.
Even here you think
Yeah.
the future's electric?
It is. Definitely, there is no question about it.
So you think that you used to be a lot more... And for students here, this transition is a necessary step.
Dubai is one of the biggest carbon polluters. We export so much oil, and I think that living in a country like this, like the UAE, it is our responsibility to use our voices and use our platforms to make the changes that we are partially responsible for.
I think it's really important to consider youth in the actions, and if we're not considered, how can we be expected to carry on these decisions to the future? Because the youth are the ones that are going to be experiencing the long-term effects of our ancestors' actions.
The desert is clearly good for solar energy, but a hostile environment for another green favourite, local food. This is the Ahlein Oasis, and for thousands of years farmers have used the natural water here, channeling it through these ducts to grow fruit like dates and figs. But what's brought me here is a much more high-tech oasis. I've been to a few greenhouses in my time, but this has got to be one of the biggest and most high-tech I've ever seen. This is the UAE's first commercial-scale smart farm, capable of producing fruit and vegetables all year round, even when the temperature outside hits 50 degrees.
This is the most sophisticated greenhouse I've ever worked in.
And what is it that makes it so?
Now, we are extremely in control here. Despite the harsh conditions outside, we can create an environment where the plants will flourish. And we can control a climate whereby there is an optimum transfer of sunlight into food.
The UAE imports up to 90% of its food, so solutions like this are important for food security, but also greener than flying in fresh food, though the farm currently still uses peat. Oh, impressive. How important do you think it is to grow food locally?
You don't want to put your tomatoes in an airplane from Europe to here. So from that perspective, for the planet, this is a better solution.
But despite being so reliant on imports, the Emirates have a massive food waste issue.
Anything you can find in your kitchen, you've probably got it in here. From your basmati rice to your sodas, your cooking oil, more soda, milk, you name it.
And all of this you can recycle?
Absolutely, A to Z.
Even the chips?
Even the chips. Want some?
Not now, thank you. All of these are recycled along with tons of fresh food. If sent to landfill, much of this would rot and emit methane, a powerful greenhouse gas, along with risking the contamination of groundwater. Much better to make new materials and fresh compost.
There's over $1.6 billion of food that is wasted annually
And that's in
the UAE alone.
the UAE alone.
Yeah.
It's quite a luxurious society, which means it's quite a wasteful society here, isn't
Yes, that's the truth. Overconsumption, overproduction as a result. That's the issue today with the society that we live in overall.
it? How much are you growing?
Oh, I mean, let's put it this way. We are desperate to get out of this place and triple the size that we have today. We're growing every year 5 to 7 times of our current capacity. Don't get me wrong, we're not Mother Teresa, okay? We're trying to be a force for good for the environment, while at the same time being a force for business growth and profits.
All these companies feel a real change happening here. The Emirates going from laggards to major players in green tech. But the country is still making billions extracting and exporting fossil fuels, with plans to pump much more. At least now, it's not the only game in town.
So where does the balance lie? Are they really serious in places like this about the energy transition? Well, to talk through that, I'm joined by Laurie Haitayan, who's from the Natural Resource Governance Institute, really an energy expert for this part of the world. Laurie, help me to understand the mindset here. Are they serious about it?
So these petrostates, especially in the Gulf, they do care about the environment, they do care about climate, because it's an existential issue for them. Imagine now it's December and it's 27 degrees here. And with the high rise of temperatures that we're talking about, if we don't do anything about it, then you will have more. Like imagine in December, it will be like more with 4 degrees. So that is unbearable.
Well, that's about the future. The past is quite interesting too. This is a very young country which grew on the back of oil.
Look, for them, the oil and gas is not a curse. For them, that was the best blessing, and they see it as a blessing for them because it transformed the societies from being nomad, tribal, or even like fishermen, etc., that to a transformation and standard of living of what you see today, and people that got better education, better health, better living. And they see that happened with oil and gas. So today they have that issue, that complex issue of, yes, we want our people to stay in the land. We don't want it to be a place where they cannot live. We want them to have the same standard of living and better. But at the same time, we see that there is a real issue about fossil fuel and the future of fossil fuel.
So what do you think when green campaigners say, fossil fuels should be dropped very steeply, if not immediately, from places like this?
Look, they need to secure the future of their people. They need to secure a role for them in the future economy, and then that phase out will come.
But a lot of climate scientists would say we haven't got time for it to be kind of softly, for the people of these countries. We need to get on with it.
The scientists are saying that, and I do believe in science, but as well, what is happening is like a lot of money from the oil and gas, basically, is being put into new sciences, new technologies, and new ideas in innovation and research to be able to tackle this issue that is the most important issue for the people right now about the planet and the survival of the people on this planet. So they're saying that our contribution to humanity and our contribution to this, how to solve the crisis, is through putting money into these new technologies, into new energies, etc. And then they feel that will be a win-win.
And tell me about the loss and damage fund that they contributed to.
Look, loss and damage fund is very important, and this was something that was carried on from COP27, and everybody was focusing on that. And then this is a COP of implementation according to the presidency of the COP, and they acted on that. The UAE was the first to put $100 million into the loss and damage fund. So where does that money come from? We know the UAE's money is coming from mainly oil and gas. Does that a percentage of that money is coming from oil and gas? And this is a reality check. So yes, they are using their oil and gas money into definitely oil and gas production and investment, but at the same time they are contributing to the climate funds and other funds to tackle the issue.
I know we're just at the beginning, 10 days or so to go. What are you feeling about it? Optimistic?
If your expectations are that there is going to be language about phasing out from all fossil fuel, then you will be very disappointed, I guess. But if you're looking at a language about phasing out of certain fossil fuel and phasing down of certain other, you might maybe be happy.
Well, thanks very much indeed, Laurie. Fascinating. Now, we're off to a break now. When we come back, we'll take you on a little tour of what's being called the circus in the desert. Welcome back to the show and to COP28. This is what's called the Blue Zone, and up there is where a lot of the world leaders and their delegations are. But there are 100,000 people here, thought to be the biggest ever. What are all the others doing? Let's go and find out.
There are nearly 200 countries represented here. They have slightly different agendas, but are all keen to get some attention.
This is a favoured selfie spot. It's also where the leaders had their family photo. This is where they got all the country pavilions, as they're called. That one is Italy. Could be a pizza restaurant, but I think so. Barbados, I saw Burkina Faso back there. Indonesia. Let's see who we can find.
Many from so-called climate-vulnerable countries welcome, if cautiously, the announcement of some funding from richer countries to pay for loss and damage caused by climate extremes, especially those in Hurricane Alley.
I look forward to, positive things coming out of it. I am hopeful. I am putting that out there. I am hopeful.
Let's get the cameraman a banana.
A handful of pressure groups are inside the Blue Zone, one with an unexpected sales pitch.
Yeah, ask us a question about nuclear, get a free banana.
Okay.
What do you know about nuclear?
What do I know about nuclear?
Nuclear energy.
I know it's largely a carbon-free energy source, electricity source.
Right.
Oh, I get a round of applause for that. Wow, this is a good audience.
There is a new nuclear power station in the Emirates, but the economy is still largely fossil-fuelled.
What do you think about the fact that this COP is being held in a petro-state, a fossil-fuelled economy?
Yeah, we actually thought that this COP would have been able to set the foundation for us to be able to push back against fossil fuel giants and shift finance to renewables.
Here's a familiar face.
A sentiment echoed by scientists here.
Marine science is absolutely your thing. What kind of reception are you getting?
So far it's been very positive. The difficulty is to talk to people other than the people that already agree with you. That's always the challenge at COP. It's great to sit there and talk about the importance of the oceans, but if you've got a lot of ocean scientists and NGOs, that's fine. We know they're going to agree. What we want to do is take it up to the negotiators, the decision makers.
And one issue is on the menu that was previously in the too difficult box.
The reality is that we need countries to acknowledge the relationship between climate and food and climate, and invest in building pathways to build a resilient food system. Now, 134 countries have signed up to say it's really important.
The sheer scale of this summit has led to it being criticised as a circus in the desert, but I think it's better that thousands are gathering to solve the world's toughest problem than not.
Well, night has now fallen on the climate summit, and one of the ambitions of this meeting is to really get some action before 2030. Now, one of the ways you do that is to tackle methane, a very, very potent greenhouse gas. And I'm pleased to say I'm joined by two people who are working very hard, in fact delivering a lot on this. That's Stephen Hamburg and Giulia Farini from the International Methane Emissions Observatory. Stephen, what is it that you've achieved?
Well, I think what we've started to do is actually produce data that people can use to identify the sources of emissions that are actionable. And it's only the beginning. Over the next couple of years, we'll provide a roadmap, we'll provide maps of where those emissions are occurring, and in turn, who's making progress and who's not.
So you're really making what was invisible now visible. Giulia, why is it so important to do this with methane?
Because methane determines how fast the planet will warm, and CO2 determines how hot it will get, basically. And so, since methane is a short-lived climate pollutant, it has a shorter lifetime in the atmosphere, but it's way more powerful than CO2, over 80 times. So basically, you need to run the methane sprint to win the CO2 marathon, if it makes sense.
Yeah. And so what is it that you've been able to do now that we weren't able to do before?
So as Steve was saying, we are starting a methane data revolution. So what IMU is about is putting the right data in the hand of the right people.
Is there a particular country where you've been able to identify a problem?
So we have a very good success story in Argentina with our satellite program called Mars. We detected large emitting events in Argentina, and by large we mean over a ton per hour. And so we immediately notified the government, who then informed the operators. And in this case, it was ruptured tube at a site that was causing it to unknowingly leak methane, because that's the issue with methane. In most cases, the operator don't even know that they have methane emissions. And so the operator repaired the
This
leak.
was literally a broken pipe.
Yes, but
Methane was just spewing out of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the operator didn't know. They repaired it. They implemented a leak monitoring program to avoid future leaks. And since then, we've been monitoring the site through Mars, and we've seen that the site is not emitting anymore.
I'm sure you don't like the term, but do you have the evidence, in effect, to be the methane police force, that you can really see the guilty parties?
Well, I think rather than think of it as the police force, we have the evidence to show what's actually happening. So that can be both ways. It's a carrot and a stick. So those who are really operating well and not emitting, it's a reward. For those who are polluting and emitting a lot to the atmosphere, they've got problems.
Give me some numbers. What are you finding?
Well, we're finding that there are hundreds of these very large emission sources. Methane only lasts about a decade in the atmosphere. Yeah. So if we look at its impacts when you emit it over the next 20 years, it's more than 80 times more impactful than CO2. And that is really critical because it's driving our near-term changes in the climate. We want to slow down the rate of those changes, slow down the damages. To do that, we have to double and triple down on reducing methane emissions. One of the things we really want to make sure that happens is that we have a complete picture. So we provide enough data. These very large sources that the Methane Alert and Response System, MARS, shows is a great example. So it starts to get people to think about what they couldn't previously understand. And so we're starting with these large point sources and moving to having full maps of where those emissions are.
No hiding place, the big emitters
No
of
hiding
methane.
place. The data will be public around the globe with a fine grained picture so that it's not about, you can't point at someone else. You know who's emitting it, you know where and how much.
Stephen, Julia, thank you both very much indeed. Well, that's it from this climate show from COP. Next week we will have more reports from here, but we're also going to be at the equally glamorous Crewe Junction looking at freight trains. Remember, you can get all your climate and environment news on the Sky News website and app, or by scanning the QR code that's on your screen right now. But from Dubai, goodbye.